Well, Marie-Louise, thank you so much for being here with me on the Entrepreneurial Success Podcast. I'm thrilled to have you here because I know we're going to talk about branding and Canva as it is so beautifully displayed behind you.
Thank you.
Talk about branding. However, I want you to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us what you do.
So, I'm Marie-Louise from Lovely Evolution, and I am a branding designer and Canva specialist. That's what I kind of say my spiel. And I guess in a nutshell, I help I bring in my branding and design expertise to either create stuff for my clients in Canva, and I also train people, so those that are non-designers, so that they can learn, some really key techniques to help improve, their own designs of what they're putting out there. So that's me in a nutshell.
I know, and I'm a huge fan of Canva. Honestly, that's all I use, and I think it's become so much more popular over the last couple of years as well. But before we dive into branding and Canva, I want to know a little bit about your story. How did you get started in business, and how did that kind of transpire to where you are now?
So in terms of how I got into design, I've always been creative. Like growing up, I've always loved, drawing and doing stuff. But I also knew that I didn't want to be a starving artist. So I knew I wanted to do something that was commercial, but still quite artistic and creative. And I ended up studying branding and packaging at university. So quite a number of years ago now, good like 20 years, I think. Don't know where that time's gone when I first started. And it was something that I just was really like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm going to go out and do. So I worked in a number of design agencies over the years. I actually did quite a lot of print-based work, so things like brochures. I did some annual reports and stuff like that. And then back in 2008, I got married, and I was going to do my own wedding stationery, control freak. I was like, no, I'm a designer, I'm going to design my own. And I was just at that age where I knew that other my friends would get married, and maybe there could be some mileage that I could do this thing as a bit of a hobby alongside my design job. They were quite different, so there wasn't that kind of clash or conflict. And maybe it could be something that becomes my kind of main thing, but initially let's have some fun. So I set up Lovely Designs, as I was called then, back in 2009, and had a very pretty logo that was all to do with like very wedding appropriate. And then it didn't really take off. Like I think I didn't realize how much marketing and stuff. And I think there's always that mentality of like that hobby thing, because I wasn't all in, but I certainly gave it a good go, like going to wedding fairs. And I even featured in Vogue in one of their wedding specials and stuff like that. So I did, I was more than some. And when it came to a point where like my work, my job at this design agency in London it was time to move on. My son wasn't quite 2 yet, and I knew that I wanted to be present for my son. I didn't want to be going back to a full-time position, because luckily when I returned to work, I was able to do 4-day week, and that worked really well. So I was at this point where it's like, it's time to move on. The places I was looking at were like, no, it's got to be full time. And that was the one thing I was just not willing to budge on. So I was like, right, I'm going to have to do it myself. I'm going to have to work for myself. And because I dabbled already, I kind of knew that it's not going to be like, create a logo for myself and open up business, have a website and, ta-da, have all the clients coming in. So I had that foundation knowledge of like the realities of running a business, even if it was a bit of a dabble. And so I decided to keep the name, what was at the time Lovely Designs, after agonizing over it. Do I rebrand? And I thought, no, I'm going to evolve. I'm going to see where it takes me. And was doing kind of networking locally, and wanted to really build up my connections and support and, business through referrals. And just sort of kind of like a, leaf going down the stream. I thought, well, let's see where things take me. I knew that having a niche was important from like my branding experience and stuff, but I just wasn't ready to. I wanted to see, I didn't want to just force one. I wanted to be a bit more organic about it. And so I then, after a couple of years of setting up full time on my own, I sort of assessed who my clients are. What kind of work am I doing? Is it time to niche now? And I noticed that I was doing a lot of work that was more branding focused, so like logo design and their other stuff that they needed. And I really loved that. So I'd moved away from that print-based background of leaflets and brochures and stuff. I was like, that's fine. I'm okay with that. And then, I decided to really focus on businesses that had been established and needed to rebrand themselves, because I was like, well, people go out there and start businesses and they haven't got it all figured out. Things change, things happen. That means that what they originally thought they'd be doing and who for can change. And so at some point you've got to assess that and rebrand, to be truly speaking to your target market. So I rebranded, and again, agonized ages. Do I keep the lovely bit? And in the end decided to call myself Lovely Evolution. But in the meantime, I discovered Canva, and I'd been building up, sort of creating design templates for my clients and part of the branding process. And then I was then becoming really known for Canva. So I kind of got a bit carried away. The whole branding evolution, service kind of took a bit of a back burner, but it's always been at the heart of what I train people in and part of my design process, the way I collaborate with my clients. It's like, you don't have to have it all figured out straight away. Yes, it's great and it's worth spending time figuring that stuff out, but it's okay to sort of change and tweak and refine it, and adjust as you go. So it does go hand in hand. And I've been definitely on a bit of a journey in the last 6 years or whatever it's been. It's sort of figuring it out, and longer from when I originally started my own business.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you mentioned there, which I really love, and I love the fact that you mentioned it as well and said it, is you just decided, like, let's just see where things go. It's like a leaf on the water. Let's just go with the flow. Let's just see how things organically progress. How do I organically figure out what my niche is and not force things? And I think this is very important, because there's so many people who start off in business who's just forcing the whole time. And let's face it, we want everything to happen so quick these days, because we've been brainwashed with emails and technology and things just happening at the tip of our fingertips all the time. We want things to happen immediately, but you can't. You have to let things take on sometimes a form of its own and just grow organically. And you've done that. And look at where you are now, all those years on. It's amazing experience that you've built up.
Well, like when I first sort of set up, I guess, my sort of second start date, which was January 2016, where I sort of was like, right, I'm all in with my design business. I don't think if someone had come to me and said, I'm from the future, you're going to be doing this group programs and training and using this program called Canva that's for not, it's aimed at non-designers, and you're going to be teaching them how to do it themselves and all of this. I don't know, really? You're a bit mad. What? And it's just through coaching and seeing how, like, my business has evolved and what I want out of my life, not just what I want for my business, of that balance, that going down that, being able to train groups of people how to use Canva makes the most of my time, but it's balanced with that kind of hands-on, me getting in there doing the design. So I really feel like I'm building this professional life for me that I've shaped, that I love. But it would only be that way if I had gone, well, hey, let's develop this idea a bit further. Let's see where that goes. And it's led to some amazing opportunities. Like earlier this year, I got invited to write a book on Canva, and I was like, okay, great. Is it just going to be like a how to use Canva? I was like, no, I really want it to have like that anchor with the branding. It needs to have that focus. So it's blending the two really strong, messages, I guess.
Yeah, and congratulations. I mean, when you said that you got that invite to write the book about Canva, that was such great news. You were so excited about it. So You know, as we say, watch the space when it comes out. Oh my gosh, we're definitely going to tell you about it, because for those of you who are creative and who love Canva, or even if you've never heard of Canva before, this is something that I'm sure you're going to go and Google and find out after this podcast episode. So Marie-Louise, let's talk a little bit about branding. Let's talk about branding first in that aspect. I think it's really important for people to understand branding. But there's one of the things that you mentioned in particular when we start talking, you said that the thing that you really got to focus on in branding is consistency.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
So something that I see a lot, whether people use Canva or not, because when you're on social media and in particular, often you sort of see people do all these different things, and there's that almost scattergun approach, or they're posting, their post looks like this 1 minute and then it's all these different colors and this font there. And it can be a bit jarring, like it can look a bit unprofessional, but it just shows that you don't have this clear message and this clear understanding of who you are as a business owner or as a business, and that you're not really keeping in mind who you're aiming to. So the consistency part, means that you can really have that clarity. So, in real practical terms, so for example, what you do with your brand is a very good example of being consistent, because I've seen, your the videos for, your thumbnails for this series. I've seen some of your social media. It all looks consistent. You've got the same sort of color palette, your pairing of fonts and stuff. So if you suddenly kind of introduce like loads of blue, but like a really dark blue, or this color, like reds and stuff, it wouldn't feel on brand for you. Mm-hmm. So yes, you could rebrand and you could introduce another pop of color and have that as a sort of second effect. So it's not saying you couldn't ever have an additional color, because branding and all your associated parts of that, it's not set in stone. That's where, back to that evolving. Mm-hmm. But if you kept chopping and changing, when people scrolling through your feed, they don't on an unconscious level kind of click, oh, that's Henriette's post there, if you suddenly introduced a completely different look and feel. So that's why it's really important. It's a very, very simple way of looking more professional and making sure that your message gets out there. And it can take time to build that up. But if you think about any, big name, brand, they've got a really clear look and feel across everything that they're doing. So you go on their website, or see an advert on a bus stop or in a newspaper or magazine, you go on their social media. Not everything is necessarily cookie cutter the same. So they haven't like, oh, you can only use this image and only that. But there is a look and feel. There's a type of imagery that's used. Maybe it's black and white photography, or, the color palette is, they've got their brand colors and fonts. And as small businesses, you can do that same. You can be your own brand guardian and make sure that you're using that same principle. And it just means that you just, I don't know, particularly in the context of, say, if you're on Instagram, if someone goes to your gallery and you've got this thing crazy over there and that there, it's like, yes, have a bit of variety, but you want to be really clear what your branding is. If someone goes onto my Instagram, yes, I've got personal pictures in there and I've got some fun stuff I share other people. So there is a little bit of a smorgasbord of stuff. It's not regimented. I know some have a very clear strategy that it should look the same, and they use the kind of grid thing and make it amazing. And I'm like, I don't have time for that. But I have a very clear look and feel of like the colors and palette that I want to use that ties it all in together, that when one of my posts pops up on someone's feed, hopefully they're like, oh, I think, oh, it is one of Marie-Louise's. Oh, I like what she posts. I'll have a little click or like it or whatever. Yeah. So that's how it works in a nutshell, really.
And I think it's really important, not just from a professional level as well, but in order to retain people's attention. And I find this as well personally, when I go on, and I've seen this as well, if I go to some other companies or people's websites, and you do see a lot of inconsistency within the brand, it almost makes you feel like I don't want to continue looking at it anymore, because we are visual human beings. We like things visually to be attractive. So if you're looking at something visually and it's not attractive and it's not consistent, your attention is dragged away, isn't it? And let's face it, these days we all have very short attention spans.
Absolutely. And I think it also can mean, there can be some mixed messages there. So often, we all have a favorite social media platform or a favorite way of marketing. For example, my least favorite is, say, Twitter. I've never really gotten on with it. I have got a Twitter profile, but I'm not active on it. But I have at least made sure that if someone goes on there, the branding is there and it's, it fits in with everything that I'm doing. Again, there's lots of people who don't like LinkedIn, they don't get it. And you go on there and there's a picture of them that's like from 10 years ago and it's clearly 10 years old, because if you go on their Facebook and like friends with them there, you're like, okay, well, are they the same person? Or like they've not updated it, they're still like an old business that they do. It kind of almost sort of, it's the equivalent of, are the shutters half down on the shop? Like, are you open? Are you not? Like over here? Or so that's where, making sure that you're consistent, not only what you're putting out on social media, but also across the board, because these are all your touch points with, someone that you're speaking to. Your business card. When we were doing in-person networking, people would give me their business card and they'd be apologizing for it. And you're like, no, you need to be like 100%, really proud to be like, this is what I do and it represents, because, to paraphrase, your brand is, people are talking about you now. Now I'm like getting mixed up. Your branding is, it's basically when people are talking about you and you're not there in the room, or something to that effect, or the impression that you leave. So when people go onto your website, for example, you're not there sitting next to them talking them through, well, these are my services and this is how you work with them. Yes, if you're having a one-to-one with someone, you can chat through. But then after that conversation's finished and they want to go and follow you on Instagram or whatever, you need to make sure that there's that, that message, that core message of what you're trying to get out there is across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all comes back together to just staying consistent, exactly like you said in the beginning, because that consistency is key. And also what I find is, talk about consistency, whatever you do in business, not just branding, but if you are consistent, it creates a bigger trust factor as well. Because by staying consistent, people go immediately like, oh, this is something that's got a good foundation. They are consistent. I like them. And then with that, obviously, you build that trust factor as well. So I think that consistency throughout branding, oh my goodness, it's so important. And personally, I've seen a huge difference a couple of years back when I started becoming a lot more consistent in my branding as well. I saw a huge difference in the kind of engagement and the attraction that it was providing me for my business. Let's talk a little bit about the target market, because together with branding, obviously, it's not just about picking your favorite colors and choosing the favorite fonts. There's a little bit more of work behind branding to do with that.
Absolutely, yeah. So, if you have a clear idea of who you want to work with, and maybe even who you don't want to work with, it means that you can tailor, if you haven't already got a logo, of making sure that logo is going to attract your ideal client. So often with sort of small businesses, like single owner managed businesses, often you are your own target market, or certainly there is some resonance there of appealing, or sometimes it's your target market is a version of yourself in the past, I suppose. And it's just a case of really being clear about that, because then any decision that you make regarding like what Canva template you pick, what are the right colors to use, what images to use, you're always keeping in mind, who you want it to appeal to. Like your message is going to be a lot more targeted and personal. And so this is where, when we talked about having a niche, having a niche is quite useful, because again, it's just another way of being really specific in what you're posting, the message you're putting out there. Because if you're just putting something that appeals to anyone, you know, like anyone who's breathing with skin, you know, like, well, that doesn't spark the ideas of, oh, that's me. Even though you do, like, your breathing have skin, you know, you're not really talking direct to that person.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like that same old saying, you know, if you talk to everybody, you actually talk to nobody.
Exactly.
But I think this is really important, because this is one of the facets that I always talk about with my clients is, do you actually know who your target market is? Do you actually know who that client is that you want to work with? What is their language? How are they thinking? What are they saying to themselves? What are their goals, their ambitions, their dreams? You really almost got to get into their head and understand
Absolutely.
really who they are, and then build the alignment of your brand between you and that ideal client.
Absolutely. And it's being really clear that that's who you want to attract. So, you know, in terms of the text that you're putting in there, but it all combines. And I think, as you said, the more you can drill down and really picture them, you know, you can build client avatars or profiles. You can really sort of have a picture of what they might look like. You could name them, and they could be, you know, an existing client or a past client, or someone who you'd love to be your client. But the clearer you can be, sort of being like, okay, I want them to be my client, and that you geared it up to them. It's the same, I've heard it as a technique if you're like creating a YouTube channel or doing a video that you're putting on Facebook. If you picture that person, that one person being opposite, like we are now here on Zoom, that we're having this conversation, you're going to have that connection that you wouldn't if you're just like, oh, I'm just doing this to my camera phone, or I'm just doing this to my laptop, or whatever. That human spark is there. And the same is true with having that connection, clear idea of your target market. It's a real foundation of branding, and I see it a lot where small businesses and startups don't consider that.
Mm-hmm.
And it means that their logo can look quite generic. You know, it just looks a bit bland. You know, it may not necessarily be a bad logo, and you know that, you know, their message and stuff might not necessarily be bad, but it's forgettable. It's average. You know, and we're in business to stand out and to actually make a difference, to work with clients. You know, we want clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there's one tip that you can give everybody here listening about branding, what one tip would you want to give people today?
Well, I think it would have to be along the lines of, I saw a quote once, and there's no attribution to who originally said it, but it's, everything is a work in progress. And I think that really ties in nicely with my brand, how I figured things out, and also the advice I give to my clients. So it's about doing what you can with the time and resources and money that you have, and you know, just try and keep moving one step forward at a time. I mean, I think it's quite aligned with sort of some of the talks that I've heard you say about, you know, about focusing on that one thing, get really good at that, and then move on to the next. And I think, you know, I'm a small business and I work with a lot of small businesses, and I think it's really easy to get overwhelmed. And so if you treat it as, you know, rather than wait until everything is 100% perfect, that you've got everything looking professional, well, what can you improve? Is it taking stock of your Canva and making it a bit better and progress it further? So that would be my key takeaway. Just remember that everything is a work in progress.
Oh, yes, it is. I mean, if I think back to first time I created my brand colors on my website, I didn't even want to mention it. Dark gray and, you know, shocking pink. How horrendous was that? But it evolved. You know, I suck it up and I evolved. So yes, everything is evolving. I want to talk a little bit about Canva now. So well, I say we only because I know Canva exists and how amazing it is. And some of the people here in the audience might know, but those who don't know, how can you explain Canva to people?
Okay. So Canva is a free and paid for program with lots and lots of templates, and it's aimed at non-designers primarily, so that they can create anything from, you know, business cards, social media, posters. There's pretty much anything that you can think of, and it just means that you can have really professional looking creations for whatever you need to put out there, at a few clicks of your mouse. And so that's, you know, and it's great because there's lots of resources within there. There's lots of high quality illustrations, there's really great photos. So there's all these things in one place that just kind of makes life easier for you to be able to have professional looking results without the cost of a professional designer like me.
But I think this is the thing, because, you know, honest, hand on heart, the first time I went into Canva, I was like, oh my goodness, it is amazing, and yet I'm so overwhelmed, I don't even know where to start. And I literally went down the rabbit hole of like, oh, I want this template, and oh my gosh, I want this template, and I can do this, and I can do this. At the end, I was just like, I don't even know what I want to do. I want to do stuff with Canva, but I don't even know what I want to do. Yeah. And it can be a little bit of a, how can I say, an overwhelm if you're just starting out and just going into it and diving in and trying to figure out what all the features are. But I think this is what is so good about what you're doing with Canva, because you're offering the training. And let's face it, Canva, you know, they've got a couple of videos here and there to show you, but you really give a lot of training as to how to start with step 1 and how to end up in step 20, if only there are so many steps. But really just how to go through the process and the motions and getting to know the platform, and really getting out on the other side where you go like, oh my gosh, did I actually create this?
Yeah, so I mean, I've seen some really great results of my group program, and I've got 4 ladies on there, and seeing their progress over the last few months has been amazing. They're all like hand on heart, like I'm not a designer, you're amazing, but like I don't know how I would do that. But over the course of like, you know, breaking down you know, the process and showing, okay, you need to click here and you need to click there, they're seeing for themselves, and I'm explaining as I go, you know, why you need to line things up. And so yes, when you're using something like Canva, they've done the hard work for you, but then when you change things, like change the text, change the image, you move things about, you can kind of break it a little bit, you know, that's where things can go a bit awry. So yes, it's a really powerful tool, but ultimately it is just a tool. So it's trying to pair a little bit of familiarity of a program. So when you're new to anything, it can be overwhelming. So it's starting small, trying out what you can and building on that knowledge base. But it's also trying to, if you want it to look good and you're feeling that what you're creating isn't that great, it's trying to understand, well, why is it not there yet? Because whether you think you're creative or not, we all have an opinion about what we see, you know, whether it is that advert in a magazine or, you know, what box of tea you pick up. There is an impact to the design that went into that will impact your buying decision. And so we do recognize that even when we're at the point where we're like trying to create ourselves something and kind of going, it's not working, or you get overwhelmed by the choice. So there comes a point where you have to either just pick something and get started, figure it out later. And that's where there's that kind of perfection trap of, you know, just have a bit of a play, try and keep it fun. You know, I think when you're first starting out, kind of trying this one and that one and this one is fine. But when you reach a point where you're like, okay, I like the look of this, trust your instincts and go with it, you know.
Yeah.
And that's where the kind of consistency comes in. And you know, you can tweak it a little bit. You know, people aren't there going, oh, well, you moved that blob there from there, you know, and like people aren't going to message you about that. But it's trying to find that balance.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, I'm imagining it back and going back into the days when I started with Canva, and that was exactly my journey. I just went in there and just started playing and making up things. I mean, oh my gosh, I deleted so many of them, but I just went in there and I just went crazy up to a point where I was like, oh, something is happening here. I kind of like this. This is new. This is different. And yes, I mean, you do use some of the templates, and then you start getting even more creative and you start making it your own. And then you start creating from scratch and things like that. But there's going to be a point where you've got to start, like all of us, and just go and play with it. But I think this is what is so great about what you're doing, because you do get the kind of people who is now Googling Canva as we speak, I'm sure, who's never heard about it. And they go like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Oh, this is so overwhelming, but I want to do this. And for those people who really want to dive into it and really want to try and figure themselves out, I mean, you've got some amazing training just to help them to get started with this. Or you would get those kind of people who look at it and to go like, no, thank you, this is not my thing. Actually, Marie-Louise, can you do this then for me? So it's good because you cater for both of those two entities. And I think this is what makes it so good with what you're doing, because with your branding backgrounds, you can honestly go and do anything for people and help them out, either them starting on their own, or they just go and say, Marie-Louise, you do it for me.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you know, it works both ways. That they might commission me to create their logo and some templates so they can be consistent and have their brand all in there, all professionally designed, that either they go and create the content to put on social media, or, you know, hire a VA or whatever's right for them. But it can be the other way, that they've already have a logo and all of that, but they're wanting to create stuff on Canva, but they're sort of struggling a bit. Or they've been doing my training, but they just like, no, for this project, I just want you to do it for me, you know. So I can kind of come in and help out at any sort of point, really. And, you know, some people like to learn how to do it themselves. I mean, I guess that's where I've been having some real fun doing my lovely Canva demos on a Friday within my Facebook group. And, you know, it doesn't take away from the core of what I'm training people to do in my program, because there's a flow to that. But I think it's just really nice to be able to help people and have that, oh, okay, you know, like, this is the difference, that changing these things around. And sometimes it's a very small thing, and sometimes there's quite a few big changes that need to be made. And, you know, the difference is really powerful. And when you add it all up, it can be the difference between attracting your client or putting them off and having them running virtually screaming up the hills and far away.
And that's not what we want. We want them to rather come back to us.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask you, talk to us a little bit about your free Facebook group, because you did mention before you and I got on this call, I know that you've got some free tips, some design tips in your Facebook group, and you just mentioned that you do some videos as well. So talk to us a little bit about the Facebook group, and what is the Facebook group called as well?
So it's called Lovely Canva Crew, and then there's some other words in it for search terms. But if you just search for Lovely Canva Crew, or I'm sure you'll share the link at somewhere. But yeah, so it's building to be this really nice community that, you know, I see it as a place where people can share what they're working on and ask for feedback. And it's not just me going, oh, this is what I think. There's lots of other people who jump on and go, oh, well, what about this? Or I see what you mean, or what are you trying to say? And it's interesting that there are people who are sort of almost like parroting what I've been talking about for like months, of like, well, who's your target market then? I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good point. Like, who is your target market? So, and, you know, people have also posted like questions of like, I'm trying to do this, I'm struggling, is this allowed, or whatever. As well as, you know, obviously the tips that I try and drip feed and put in there and share. I do a free Canva Q&A as well once a month. So I'm sort of sharing the recording of that into the group, but people can join that live. So there's a lot of things that, you know, I'm committed to helping people, whether they come to me to be a design client or to learn how to do it themselves. I want them to be able to access and learn for free at some point or another, you know, in some way. that because that's all part of building the relationships, and it's just part of my value set of that I just love giving. I'm like, here, have this and this and this. Like, oh yeah, I need to like charge for stuff as well. I'm running a business.
Yes, indeed. But thank you so much, because what Marie-Louise is doing, she's making her Facebook group available to everybody here listening. So if you're just starting out with Canva, or if you've been using Canva for a while, it doesn't matter. You can never stop learning, because also they update their features every single time.
I'm still learning.
I know. Every time I log in, I was like, oh, something's new is happening here, or they brought in a new feature. So I would suggest that you go and join Marie-Louise's free Facebook group, where you can obviously get some more tips. You can go and see some of the videos that she's got going on there. You can join the Q&A and just really get to develop, you know, your own creativity using an amazing platform such as Canva, giving them lots of kudos here. But at the same time, I know that there might be some of you listening to this and going, I wouldn't even know where to start. I wouldn't even know what to do. Well, in that sense, I'm just going to give you all Marie-Louise's details so you can go and stalk her and connect with her. So you can get in touch and obviously ask her to help you out. So either way, you are going to benefit. So I would just go and say, connect with her. I'll put her Instagram link in the show notes, her LinkedIn details in the show notes, and of course her free Facebook group will be there as well. But all in all, Marie-Louise, oh my gosh, thank you so much for being here. Is there any last tips you want to leave with the audience, or do you feel you've kind of laid it all out?
I think we've covered quite a lot here. I think everyone's like, oh, I'm going to go and play with Canva now.
I know, they can't wait to finish this recording, this episode, so they can just go, can I just go now and go and play with Canva? Anyway,
yeah,
listen.
I think it's just about having fun ultimately. That yes, it's about you know, being professional, but don't forget to have fun. So whether you're creating something that's like an invitation for your kids' party, or sending a birthday card to someone, or you know, doing something that's business related, have fun and experiment, because it's through the making mistakes and getting it wrong and playing that you learn and make it better, and maybe stumble across that amazing thing that works right for you.
Yeah. So just go and have fun. That's what business is all about, and life. Just have fun with it. Marie-Louise, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed this, and I really enjoyed, you know, just sharing all your knowledge. And I just appreciate, you know, the fact that our paths have crossed and we've met, because we always have had such good conversations. So I appreciate the fact that you made the time to come on the podcast. Thank you so, so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And it's so nice to be able to be here and be part of your series. I'm honoured.
Oh, bless you. No problem at all. Well, we will be in touch very soon again. And for those of you listening, go and join Marie-Louise's free Facebook group. You are going to love it. We'll see you there. Thank you so much, Marie-Louise.
Thank you.